I call we Lees-Galloway.
Very much, Mr Chairman. I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for his contribution, although it troubles me a little bit that there's still a large degree of confusion from members opposite about what this bill does, despite the lengthy consideration it was given at Select Committee. So I want to clear up one piece of confusion, and that is the Select Committee Chairman, Jonathan Young, said that we shouldn't require everyone to only be paid on an hourly rate. We should allow other forms of remuneration, such as piece rates and other forms, to exist. And this legislation doesn't stop that. And in fact, one thing which I think has been completely overlooked is that employees, people who are in a classic employment relationship, can be paid on a piece rate, but our employment legislation requires them to still be paid at the minimum wage, regardless of how they are being paid. So there's not a debate about whether or not we should allow people to continue to be paid at by piece rate. This is a piece of legislation which seeks to close the loophole that says by having someone in a contracting relationship rather than an employment relationship, that person is not entitled to the basic standards that they are entitled to in that employment relationship, in particular the minimum wage. Now, there are people who are in an employment relationship who are paid a piece rate, and under current employment law, they still need to be paid the minimum wage, whereas someone who is contracted but paid a piece rate is not required to be paid the minimum wage. So I really want to make that point clear, because I felt from Jonathan Young's contribution that there was still an element of confusion from the other side of the House about that. I also want to address the issue of people who are self-employed. And again, Jonathan Young referred to the ILO guidelines, and this is around ensuring that we don't mask the true relationship, the true nature of the relationship, by claiming that someone is self-employed. And someone who is in a contracting relationship where they are receiving most or all of their income from one source, from one principal contractor, cannot realistically be considered to be self-employed. And in fact, the SOP that David Parker has put up seeks to clarify the nature of self-employment and to exclude those people who are genuinely self-employed, but to include those who people might wish to deem to be self-employed, but are in fact in a contractual relationship, and in particular those who are in a dependent contractual relationship. And as David Parker pointed out, other jurisdictions have done this. Great Britain uses a method that is similar to that which is proposed in this legislation. Canada has defined dependent contractors and afforded them the rights of employees. So this is not something that's unusual. It's been done in other jurisdictions overseas. The world the sky has not fallen, their economy has not collapsed because their parliaments have decided to pass legislation that affords the normal rights of employment that everybody working in New Zealand ought to be able to rely on. So I think it's important to note that we're not trying to rule out piece rates or anything like that. And that we're not trying to impinge on people who are genuinely self-employed, and in fact, David Parker has sought to clarify that. Mr. Chairman, I want to support the comments made by David Parker around the decreasing share of of economic growth that is going to people who are on, Mr Chairman,
Lees-Galloway.
the decreasing share that is going to labour, to workers, no matter what the nature of their employment or contractual relationship, and the increasing share which is going to the owners of capital. And that has been driven through a range of different mechanisms, but there is no doubt that substituting traditional employment relationships with contractual relationships in order to circumvent things like the minimum wage and the other minimum standards that are afforded to employees is one thing that is driving that decreasing share of the fruits of productivity going to the people who are providing their labour in businesses. And we need to tidy that up. And this legislation does that well, and it does it even better with the amendments that David Parker is proposing in his supplementary order papers. The larger of those two is the result of the submissions that we heard at Select Committee, and there's an additional SOP that seeks to address some of the issues which have come up since the bill has come back from Select Committee. And I applaud David Parker for working closely with the business community to try to address the concerns that they have raised. But I must say a number of the concerns that I have seen raised demonstrate more a lack of understanding of the legislation rather than genuine issues that could arise if the legislation is passed. So there is another matter that I wanted to raise, but which has escaped my mind momentarily. So in the meantime, I will simply look at the changes some of the other changes that David Parker is proposing to bring some clarity to this legislation. Section 6A is to make it clear that the rate of remuneration is to not be less than the minimum rate. As the legislation was originally drafted, it required a minimum rate for contractors, but it wasn't clear that the rate of remuneration was not to be less than the minimum rate for employees. That obviously wasn't the intention of the original legislation, and that reminds me what I wanted to address, which was the point that one of the other points that Jonathan Young raised, which was to say that even if you provide a rate of remuneration for contractors that is at the minimum rate, they still have to pay ACC and various other costs, as do employees, in fact. So employees who are on the minimum wage are taxed, they pay their ACC levy, and what they take home in their pocket is less than the hourly minimum wage rate. And so it would be exactly the same for contractors. So if that's being used by members opposite as a reason to say that this bill doesn't meet its intended purpose, then I think it fails, because actually what it demonstrates is just another way in which this legislation makes those contractors, or gives those contractors the same rights as they would have if they were in a traditional employment relationship. So, sir, I'm keen to hear from members opposite what their response is to those matters. I'm keen to hear from them that they are clear about what this legislation does, and I urge members who have been using those arguments to oppose this legislation to reconsider their view, because I don't think that their fears are warranted. I think the fears that they have expressed have come from confusion about the legislation rather than what the legislation actually does, and I urge them to reconsider their vote.
I'm going to call Alistair Scott.